who doesn't love a feud these days? You know, it just seems like everywhere there's fights going on and all these things.
Distract them.
There he is!
What are you doing? Is that your wife over there?
But, you know, throughout history, we've always had, you know, feuds envelop. You know, one of the first stories ever discovered is the story of Gilgamesh. There's a feud in that story, Gilgamesh versus Enkidu. And those two actually end up fighting. And that's a classic fight of a city boy versus a country boy. So now we all know who wins that one. But you see these kinds of feuds all the time. You see, you know, things like King Kong and Godzilla, Hatfields, McCoys, see Batman, Superman. You know, every good guy has a nemesis, Spider-Man and Doctor Doom, and you have all of these feuds all the time. We're drawn to them. We're just drawn to them. Britney Spears and her dad. But it seems like magazine covers always have feuds on them too. One versus another, you know? Pepsi versus Coke. Chevy versus Ford. Well, even Michael Derechuk and Black Raven Ranch. Oh, you've never heard of the feud of Michael Derechuk versus Black Raven Ranch? Oh, it's pretty renowned. I was driving past a farmyard in northern Saskatchewan, and on a farm gate I saw this sign. I was trying to read it as I drove by, and I looked. I was like, what the fuck was that? So I stop, I get out, and I see the sign, and here's the sign. And it says, it's right on his gate, and it says, Michael Derechuk, you owe me $6,700 for the 128 bales you stole from my yard. Please pay ASAP. So, you know, I snapped a picture and I said, well, you know what? You know, I hate scammers, any kind of scammer. So I thought, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna post this up on my social media, have a good following, and let's get to the bottom of this story. So I posted up Black Raven Ranch, and I left it on there. I put it on my Twitter, my Instagram, and Facebook. Lo and behold, Michael Derechuk replies on Twitter, and he says this. He goes, F you, man. Well, clearly it's not me, but I was doing it for this Black Raven Ranch guy. But this is great. He goes, F you, man. You were banging my wife when I was baling all that hay when it was 105 out. I'm keeping the hay, and you can keep the whore. How's that for a deal? It never happened. It's fantastic. What a plot twist. What a plot twist. It was, you know, one of those surprise endings. You just Game of Thrones ending on that one. I love it. We love these duels. We love these little things where, you know, one person against another, pitted against each other. It's obviously something ingrained in, you know, humanity to always have an enemy to overcome, it seems. The same thing happens in agriculture. And, you know, we always have the green guys and the red guys and the yellow guys. Finally, these big agriculture companies, they're starting to feud against each other. I'm talking about the John Deere X9 that's just been released to the public this year has called out Claas, essentially. Well, Claas doesn't know it, but they called him out. And what they did was they did some head-to-head testing. They got PAMI, the Prairie Agricultural Machinery Institute. They hired them as a third party. Who hired them? John Deere hired them as a third party to put the X9 combine, 1100 X9, up against the Claas Lexion 8800. So let's go over the tail of the tape here. Let's see what we got. Let's see how this thing pans out. And it's not quite what I expected, I'll tell you that. But we're gonna start with some easy stuff. Let's start with some marketing. Who created the better promo video? So we'll start with the Claas video here. Just see what their promo video looks like and compare that to the John Deere one. Let's get going. Solid intro. Good view there. It's pretty tough not to run that over. Looking out some corn. Oh, it looks like the older. Oh, I see what's happening here. Oh yeah, we have a takeover. Oh, they put the camera through the combine. Oh, cool. Oh, this is New World. Oh, this is way different now. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, he's skipping a pass. That's pretty good. Some traps. Nice. That's a good video. Oh, a little slow-mo action there. Don't mind. Oh! Wow. Oh, it looks like no dust, but oh, it's pavement. Pavement package. Oh, automatic rock trap. That's something some company could do better. Bubble auger, vertical. That's smart. I like that. It's good. Lights don't look that bright. It's kind of rapey, but they can have. Well, the lights don't look like they cast that far. Oh no, that video was actually, that's a good promo video. Okay, well that's the Claas one. Let's see the John Deere one now. Yeah, I don't know why John Deere doesn't have their promo video right on their site, or a promo video on the site for a brand new combine. It seems like it's something that you probably should have there. I can't find one on their website. There is one that introduces the X9 that I'll just use for that. I saw it right when it came out, and I'll just watch a similar amount of time to the Claas one, and then we can decide. All right, let's see here. All right, it's a good opening there. Stepped in, looks pretty clean. I don't know if he had a service. It just, well, we're going.
With the new X Series
we are going. Well, that reel
we're
is
redefining
spinning.
what's possible in harvesting capacity
That's a nice,
and efficiency.
Looks like we're getting right into it here. We are not wasting time with this X9. Oh yeah.
In wheat, the X9
Okay,
1100 can harvest up to
start
30
making some
acres
bold
an
claims.
hour.
Let's
And in high-yielding corn, it can harvest up to 7,200 bushels per hour,
that's pretty impressive.
which is more than enough to fill 7 trucks per hour.
Or
What's more, you can start earlier in the day or finish later, and operate at near maximum capacity
well,
throughout the day.
getting quite the lesson
And it does
done
this
here.
all while using 20% less fuel. Inside, these combines have significantly larger areas for threshing, separating, and
All right,
cleaning.
yeah, Claas
Yet
10.
the outside
We got,
dimensions are remarkably about the same as our S790.
that's
To
pretty
match the
remarkable.
increased harvesting capacity of these combines, we redesigned our full line of headers. We'll cover those details in a separate video.
Okay, I don't want to.
Let's start with the features and functionality of the X9 1000.
Well, I give
and
it about
the X9
a minute
1100.
21 to. I give it a minute 21, same as the Claas video, to kind of lure me in, and yeah, it was all right. I guess it gave some information off the start, but I'm gonna have to give Claas the clear winner on this one. Let's do more of the comparables of the X9 to the 8800. So they're both Class 10s. So anything over 600 horsepower is Class 10. The Deere has a John Deere engine, the JD PSS 13.6 liter, 690 horsepower engine in the 1100, and the Claas has a Mercedes-Benz OM 473 15.6 liter, 653 horsepower engine. So it's the biggest engine that John Deere makes, but Claas actually makes a bigger engine. They make a 790 horsepower engine. So I think comparing apples to apples, if we're going for the biggest combine on the market, I think they should compare the largest John Deere, highest end John Deere, to the high. fairly evenly matched, I believe. The header stuff is kind of meh. I don't really like that too much, but that's fine. So let's go into the testing real quick. So they tested on 2 crops. They tested on wheat and canola. The testing was done between September 19th and October 2nd, 2020 in Marsden, Saskatchewan. Mostly large, flat, uniform area. For the test, they tested for loss curve, fuel consumption, header loss, and residue. So they go over those tests. Some of the things that to be note is that John Deere paid for it. So, you know, be mindful of that. Even though they did hire PAMI to do it, John Deere's paying PAMI to do it. So there's always things like this. So if you look at the first couple things, like the size of the headers, that's an easy one. They could have easily fixed that one as well. And the size of the Claas combine, they should have went to their largest one because John Deere got to run their largest combine. So they should have ran the 8900. Okay, so be mindful of that. When they were testing the combines and they were getting them all set up, John Deere representatives came out and they put all the settings on the John Deere combine. No Claas representatives came out. So all the Claas Lexion combine, the 8800 was all set by PAMI. Now they are, I'm assuming, qualified to set it properly. But of course, the guys that, you know, engineered and spent the billions of dollars developing this combine and running it all over the world for the past 2 or 3 years, they clearly know that combine a lot better than PAMI would know the Claas. So there is an advantage there as well. I heard they tried to get a hold of Claas and there was no response. Well, I guess we should phone up Claas and see if we can get a representative to run the Lexion combine. Yeah, no. I'll give Claas a call. I got their number here, right here. Oh, you got their number? Oh, yeah. Oh. It's ringing. Okay. Okay. Yeah, delivery. Okay, ham, pineapple, all meat. Barbecue chicken, large, no stuffed crust. Okay. All that. Did you just order pizza? No. No. Not ordering pizza. Come to the back door. Cash is there. Yeah, so no answer. Maybe text them. Good idea. I can text them. I have their number right here. Looks like they're busy. You know, but yeah, they speak German, not English, so what did we expect? Anyway, doesn't sound like they'll be coming, so let's just run these tests without them. One point of argument is, what is a Class 10? Is the 1100 considered a Class 10? They have a 1000 and 1100. You know, somebody would assume that there would be a difference in the classes, but in this report, they call the X9 1100 Class 10. And I've been trying to find the stuff to the regulations on classes, and it seems tricky to find even from the manufacturer association. What I have noticed is that there seems to be some varying definitions. I thought over 600 horsepower was considered a Class 10. That might not be the case. And then I also read that it's a combination of horsepower and cleaning area. So it's hard to really quantify what class these are in. Regardless, it doesn't matter in this, because as long as we know the comparables, you can kind of see what it is. They claim the Fendt, the newest Fendt combine, the Ideal, is Class 11. They also claim the X9 is a Class 11, even though it's under 700 horsepower. I think that's why they're trying to call it under Class 10. And then the Claas 8900 is 790 horsepower, so they would consider that to be a Class 11. So anyway, this is all very confusing, especially when you take into account the cleaning area, which I think should be taken into account as well. I think you should take into account the cleaning area of a combine into the class, because it's going to be a bigger machine the more cleaning area it has. It's a better way to rank it, because you can add horsepower by changing data on a programmer. You could make it jump 4 classes from like a 600 Class 6 to a Class 10 if you jam the shit out of the motors, and that doesn't really, so it should be done by some kind of a surface area or a volumetric measurement as well. It would just make more sense, especially moving forward as these combines get bigger. You can buy a truck factory or car or whatever factory with 800 horsepower, and all that horsepower does is turn 2 tires or 4 tires. That's all it does. It does very little. And then you have a combine that has 20,000 moving parts, or 20,000 parts, tons of which are moving in different directions at all times, and you have these 700 horsepower machines. Finally, like, it just seems like it's not a great, amazing feat to put 700 or 800 horsepower into combines. Every time when you add horsepower, you add efficiencies to them as well, because when you're putting product through the combine, you'll have it bogged down. Well, as soon as it starts to bog down and your usage of power goes through the roof, then every other part of the combine suffers from that as well. So you have to be able to go through maybe some greener stuff and not bring the combine to its knees. So, and you don't even have to make these things much bigger. Like, they can soak out of a 13.5 liter engine. They can get 1,000 horsepower out of these things. Not like they need it, but they can engineer the parts that need the most torque or horsepower to it. So I don't know, I kind of went off on a little bit of a side there, but what I'm trying to say is ranking these things by horsepower when they're gonna absolutely continually need more horsepower. You can't have a Class 20 combine just because it has a 1,200 horsepower engine. It's just, it's kind of silly. So they should make something with volume and surface area. Anyway, so we'll start with the Canola, and we'll go over we'll do over these tests. So if you look at the Canola, they got the settings done on these combines. Here's the chart, should pop up. What I kind of noticed is a little bit different is the John Deere X9 fan speed at 700. Like, it seems pretty low. Usually we have those things cranked to like 900 on the 780s, but they did add more fans, and it's 1,000 on the 8800. But if the sample was good, who cares, right? We'll go over the combine loss. So what they did for the combine loss is they opened up, allowed for a windrow. They collected of 2 areas on the combine. It goes up a belt, and then right behind it, when that belt gets full, they stop, they run it through another combine, and they figure out how much is out the back, and then they compare it to the weights, the throughput, and the grain weight on the machine. So then they calculate a loss percentage. So they did that 6 to 8 times at different rates to create their grain loss curve. And they would also pick times, 3:30, afternoon times, relatively same, and they would have combine starts, brand new rows, and usually following each other, obviously, a row over. They found that the best throughput for both combines was between 62 and 63 tons per hour. So 137,000 to 139,000 pounds per hour for both the John Deere and the Claas. That, I guess, they're comparative at throughput. The loss threshold they set for the Canola was 3%. So here's this graph. Now, you see that in the graph they have, it's pretty similar on the bottom, about looks like 22 and 28. The Claas at 22 and the John Deere at 28. They said under 2% loss. And as they go and increase the throughput, they do draw the best fit line for the machines. And you'll see that at about 90, a throughput of 90, the John Deere goes up through the roof, but they never tested the Claas at high throughput. And that's because they did the test based on operator feel. So if the operator at the time felt that the combine couldn't handle any more capacity, they wouldn't let it go to that number. So they took the John Deere up to a 90 tons per hour, and the highest apparently they could get the Claas was 73. If you're stopping the Claas at 73, and that's its maximum capacity that they thought it could go, and the loss is at 3.5%, just over the threshold, I beg to differ that combine can't take more, because as you put more product through, your loss number should just continually climb, and exponentially it should climb. So they stopped it there. That was the last number they got, and even the John Deere went over that and kept the similar loss number, and then only the John Deere was able to go to 89 tons per hour. So that's just something to be mindful of. Maybe it can't go past that. It just seems odd anyway that the loss number is still so low at its absolute maximum, but I wasn't there. Anyway, you see the curves, they're essentially the same. So the loss number is essentially the same. It's virtually the same, but this graph shows that the John Deere can take more product through it, where John Deere supposedly comes out the winner on this one. Rotor loss is similar in this one as well. You can see through the chart that it just scatters kind of up and down throughout, and there is far more variance in rotor loss than in the John Deere than the Claas. And I would say that hybrid system off the start likely helps thrash out the easiest stuff first, so you'll get a more consistent thrashing pass there. The cleaning loss percentage on this one, you can see that because John Deere obviously went a lot further with its throughput, but the curves lie very similar on the same thing. John Deere has a higher surface area for cleaning, so most of the losses from the whole test came from the cleaning shoe. The John Deere has a higher cleaning area than the Claas, and they're very similar. So for this one, even though I grew up driving green, I have taken a course and I have dropped my combine bias, just so everyone's aware. And so anyway, onward. So because this one's based on throughput, and only throughput, the header size won't make much of a difference for the most part. Fuel consumption. For the fuel consumption, what they did was they rigged in another tank. They did a pass, they turned on the tank, ran the combine, drove through the pass, left it running for 10 seconds after the pass, and then they weighed the tank before and after, and that would determine the fuel efficiency. So they did this for both combines. They talk about fuel consumption in liters per ton. How many liters per ton of grain is everybody getting through their combines? So it shows that the Claas actually uses 3.98 liters per ton, while the X9 uses 3.27 liters per ton. The only thing that kind of plays into this is a header size, because you're gonna have to drive a little bit faster to get the same amount, right? Also, what is kind of failed to mention here is header loss. They did a header test for this, and so they compared the X9 header to the John Deere header to the MacDon header. We have a 50 versus a 45 foot. which they say isn't significant. But I think it is significant that to have, they're 10%, right? So, but it's 10% more on everything. That's the thing, is it's 10% more everywhere. Is there an advantage or a disadvantage? Well, yeah, because the problem is when the biggest loss from these headers came from the outsides, where they would rub the crop, all your dividers. So when your crop dividers were touching crop, your biggest losses were there. Because the 45-foot header is smaller, it does more passes through, so it rubs more crop off than a 50-foot header does. So right off the bat, your biggest loss area gives an advantage to a larger header. Now, they did have dividing knives, and what John Deere has is this little kind of cylinder, that tapered cylinder auger. It looks like a drill kind of, that helps put it onto the outside belts. It's awesome. It's an awesome idea. There's chops and things like that. And actually, PAMI did a test on the advantage of having these kinds of knives on the outside, or stuff that feeds it away. And there is a big advantage to it. But anyway, as you can see from these charts, the biggest losses come from the outside all the time. So when they're doing these tests, this is another thing that kind of aggravates me, is that you're seeing all these losses. So in every other test, the other combine always has to do just a little bit more to get the same amount of throughput. So it's got to drive a little bit faster. Well, if you're driving faster, you're using more fuel, It's just these little things, these little metrics that I think are easy to address, and you shouldn't even have to question, in my opinion. So you look at the John Deere one, and then we look at the MacDon one, and you can see where the feeding on the outside, and it looks like it's on the right side, and that's because the crop was leaning. When you're driving through a crop, you cut the stems off, right? And then the goal is to kind of like put it onto the combine smoothly, because the pods shatter really easy. This is a shatter free canola, but nothing's ever shatter free. And because if you watch your dividers go down a field, you'll see these pods empty. And even the problem is too, is like when canola is really dry, it's fragile, and the ground is littered with pods everywhere. It's getting better. It used to be way worse. That shatter-free canola is absolutely amazing. So anyway, as you're going down the field, you're constantly just shattering pods. So the wider those dividers are, the more stuff you're gonna shatter. If you can get a knife in front, or what John Deere did was they kind of got this little swirly auger thing, that's gonna help tremendously. So if you look at the MacDon one, you'll see on the outside, there's a huge loss. And then you'll also see, as it goes into the center belt, there's a big loss there as well. Because what's happening there is everything's coming in. And when they're looking at this loss, if that's happening there, your belt speed is too high. Because what this stuff is doing is coming in, it's just smashing against itself, and it's just blowing up everywhere. So your belts, your outside, inside belts are too fast, and it's just getting pulverized right there when it has to change direction. You're bringing in crop, you're laying crop flat, and then you're having crop come in and smash that crop that's coming in, and then that's coming in from the other side too, and it's all just smashing there, and then it feeds in, and you want it to feed in. And I'm sure a lot of people already know this, but if it bunches up in the middle and it's only feeding through the middle, that's not good. And if it's not going fast enough where it's not even getting to the middle to feed into the feeder house, well, that's not good either. You want it to feed throughout the whole thing, because how it feeds into there, that feeds into your front beater as well. And with these ones, you have the cleaning system on the Claas, that hybrid system. If it's all in the middle, it's gonna miss a lot. So you want it to come in nice and flat so it can use the whole surface area. Same when it's feeding into the X9. It has a feeder that basically splits it out to each rotor. So you don't want to jam it up in the middle so the thing is starting to feed it into the rotors wrong. And I think this is all common sense. I don't even probably have to say any of this, but I think it's just often overlooked is how fast these feeder belts are going, or how everything kind of feeds in, and that's where everything starts. So I think in this example, and I don't know, I wasn't there, but this is what it looks like, just observing the data, is that it looks like their outside belts it's coming in fast. And you got to think as well, because the header is smaller and the throughput's the same, it's going faster, so it's driving more product faster right there. It's also knocking off the outside canola faster, like it's hitting it harder, it's slugging it.
Now watch this drive.
So this all could have been fixed with the same size header, or even put I don't know. They should have just used the same size header. They drove over top of the pans and then they would stop. So with the header loss, the John Deere lost about 1% of the crop in the header, while the MacDon lost 1.4%. So part of that will go to a percentage of the 10% width. But even if you take into account 10%, it's tough to do that because the worst parts are the outsides. I don't know. I don't like that. I just don't feel like I got enough out of that test, unfortunately. So when they did the fuel test, when they tested for the fuel, what they did was they ran the combines at 62 tons per hour, and they ran it down the field. They started off, make sure it was empty, got in, and then on the other side of the field, they got out. So the Claas will be driving faster the whole time for that, because the goal is 62 tons per hour. But the John Deere should run for longer because it's taking more crop. So it's another one that's kind of a tricky test, because the Claas is going to drive through it faster and process less crop, while the John Deere is going to get to drive a little bit slower and process more crop. Just being mindful of that. Like, it's just tricky to take that, and they say the header difference is insignificant, but it's not. It is significant. Let's look at those results. The results in the canola. The Claas in the canola was 3.98 liters per ton. That's what it burned. Well, the John Deere was 3.27 liters per ton. If you look at liters per hour, the Claas burns 100.5 liters per hour, and the John Deere burns 80.7 liters per hour. Now, of course, you take the same things into account, that the Claas is losing more crop on the header, and it is driving faster the entire time. But this is a significant difference. Like, I don't think that can make up the difference in crop, So it looks like the John Deere does have good fuel. It seems like it is better, the fuel efficiency of it. Just to go back to the loss curve. One more thing about this loss curve with the combines. I don't understand if when they did the best line, the best fit curve, and they found that 62 was the best place to be for their tons per hour. The only one that kind of ran close to that did an actual test close to that was the Claas. I don't know why they ran two John Deere tests at 50 rather than running one at 50 and then running one at 60. I don't know. I don't understand why they didn't try to jump it by 10 every time, and why this scatter plot is so scattered on the x-axis. You think that they would try to keep a consistent, so you can have a good gradual nice curve. But if you look, you see John Deere did 50, and then they did 76 or something, and then they did 89. why won't they run a test at 62? Like, if that's the perfect place to be, they should run a test at 62. It would make sense to me, because then you can at least confirm your results as well. I don't know. To me, this just seems like some common sense stuff. So I'm always curious why this stuff, doesn't. When they did the fuel testing, the Claas actually put through more product the whole time as well. So it was going faster to get the same, it was going faster because they set it at 25 tons per acre of grain, but the Claas, through the entire test, went faster and put more grain through. And the difference is, 5% more with a smaller header, with more grain loss on the header. See, the numbers here seem to be kind of hand-picked to, science, right? And it just seems like all of this stuff could have been, done proper. And that's the point I'm raising. So PAMI concludes that at a 3% loss, the John Deere and the Claas were very comparable. Tougher than normal crop conditions, separator loss is about 1, and then your cleaning loss is around 2. With the fuel consumption, they came to the conclusion that John Deere does have an advantage in the fuel consumption, and it does look like, even with these little nuances, that John Deere does seem to have a fuel advantage. Now, who knows where the sweet spot is on the Claas? Maybe it is a 50-foot header, or maybe a 45-foot header drives the fuel consumption up on the Deere. We also don't know if it was tracks versus tires as well, because a track machine will always use more fuel than a machine with tires. So that wasn't really specified either. Header loss, they said John Deere has a significant advantage, a 1.4 loss versus a 1% loss, but a larger portion of the Claas header has higher losses. Also with the feeding, it seems like there is an issue there as well. So I don't know if they tried to adjust belt speed or what, and I don't know, and maybe this is all 100% good, I don't know. The header cutting speed is independent from the separating and cleaning speed that the combine has. The best header would have it perfect, where it cuts perfect, it lays it down perfect at the perfect spot on the machine, but it doesn't work like that. So the sweet spot on the header maybe should have been figured out as well, and the sweet spot on the header may not be the sweet spot on the machine, and that number might be extremely important, because if your best cutting speed matches your best separating speed and cleaning speed, that's a perfect match. But if your header cuts best at 1.5 miles in canola, and but as you go to 2 mile an hour, 3 mile an hour, it loses a shitload. Well, you gotta kind of figure out how to mitigate those losses, like where the header, what speed that header loses all it performs best at versus the machine, to find out where your economic curves would meet, and that's the speed that you would preferably try to cater to. The losses on a header aren't great, but if you look at, there's a 1.4% loss on the MacDon header, and there's a 3% loss on the whole machine. So you're losing a 50% loss just on a header versus an entire combine. So clearly it's extremely important that header loss starts to come down. 1%, you can't catch it all though. And conditions, if a crop was perfectly standing straight and not blown over like this one, it could be different. It could be down to 0.3 or point whatever. It could be nothing. Anyway, I went on for way too long. That's the canola test. We'll go over the wheat one. And just to note, there's a header loss that's missing. When they did the header loss thing, there's one that's missing for the John Deere. I don't know where they can't find it, I guess. It was excluded more than likely. Maybe it was a bad test, but there was one kicked out for the MacDon as well that showed a 7.3 and a 10% header loss, and they pulled that out as an anomaly. So, you know, when they write missing, I don't know, you do have John Deere reps there. You think that there would be good record keeping, but when you have stuff like, oh, it's missing, we lost it, we can't find this thing anywhere, even though whatever, even if it's a bad number, you put it in to know that the testing isn't always perfect. Like, there's anomalies because they already did that. But missing, it looks like, oh, okay, well, you guys lost it? Like, aren't these tests really important and you've lost it? It's just, I don't know. It's small, it's small things. They are small things, but I think they're important. I don't know. I just think it kind of tells the story of how the whole test went. Okay. I also want to point out something else in the canola trials. If you go down to Appendix A, it shows you the tail of the tape, how many hours, and everything that these guys have. But if you go down to the spreader speed, you have the Claas at a max spreader speed, and you have the X9 at fixed. So the spreader speed is fixed. The residue, when the residue comes out, you have the spread. How far is the spread? Well, you have the Claas at max, and you have the John Deere at 50%. So those spreaders aren't at full speed going the whole time. And that was actually a trick that was taught to me that I don't use. But a custom combine guy told me what they used to do when they would custom combine, and hopefully they don't do this anymore, is that they would kill the spread width to free up more power everywhere else, you know, and that also saves on fuel mileage. So when this X9 is supposed to spread 50 feet wide, it actually now only has to spread 25 feet wide. So it's just dropping more and sloughing it everywhere. So there's where another point where you will see the fuel mileage difference. That's a big one because it's a big header and it's got to spread 50 feet. But it's set at 50% of the width and it's fixed. So the speed works to whatever, you know, that is. Okay, so on to wheat. And this one's very interesting. So they did a loss test, same thing, combine capacity and loss testing. They did a fuel consumption as well, and then they did residue management. Now this one is far more interesting. And it's gonna show the settings here on what everything is for wheat. One of the things that I noticed was the John Deere has way more surface area in its thrashing area. In the canola test, it was actually lower than the Claas for the RPMs. However, in this one, it's quite a bit higher. It's 1120 versus 970. So the Claas is separating at a much lower rotor speed. When you get those rotors really fast, you know, they start to vibrate and all of these things. The faster the rotor, the higher chance of grain damage and stuff like that. So yeah, I just think I'm mindful of that stuff. Here's what's interesting about this loss curve. So let's look at the loss curves. Let's go over this wheat. So with the wheat, they set the grain loss at 1% loss. They say at the Claas that it hit the 1% loss at 90 tons per hour, while the John Deere hit it at 115 tons per hour. Now, as you can see from this graph too, after they had done testing, they got closer to, you can see the John Deere is at 120 and you see the Claas is at 80, but I still can't understand why they didn't test right at those numbers just to get confirmation at the very least. What you also see is that at 140 or whatever it is, 150 tons per hour, the Claas takes a 6% loss, and they kept that point in as well. And you can see that at about 150 something, that the John Deere actually did stay under 2% the whole time in wheat. Them including that in the data pulls the graph up a lot higher, and then that changes your 1% number. It changes where your 1% is for feed. So I don't understand. What I don't understand is why they didn't just jump up by 10 every single time, and then just draw the line from there, because it looks like this is an exponential. The losses jump exponentially, and in the John Deere it didn't. They've built a scatter plot, I think, that it just isn't very good, because the Claas has a point at 80. The Claas has a point at 80, and then it has a point at 120. Like, why didn't they run 90, 100, 110, and then 120? It just, I don't, like, this just doesn't seem like it's done very well. It's too bad, because these are companies that rely on data. Like, PAMI's entire reputation relies on good data, and John Deere, they need excellent data to make their next whatever it is, you know? So, okay, so anyway, 115 tons and 90 tons. But the problem, another big problem, so here, okay, let's go with the rotor loss. It looks like as it gets higher, the largest rotor loss is, you know, Claas's last one, and, you know, John Deere is a lot more persistent. The cleaning, everything kind of stays under 1%. Like, it looks like it's, and it doesn't seem to matter. It looks like a lot of the cleaning actually is coming from, you know, clean grain seems to be falling out of the thing. So there's not a whole lot of issues cleaning the grain regardless of what speed it's at. So let's go to fuel. Here's the thing that pisses me off about the fuel. I hate to sound mad. I'm just irritated that no matter where you go, the science is always paid for, or the results are paid for before the tests are done. That's what kind of disappoints me. And it's obviously come to agriculture. Anyway, fuel consumption. Now let's look at the difference. It was almost head to head. So liters per ton, it was 2.01 for the Claas and 2 for the John Deere, right? So, you know, that seems pretty fair. Liters per hectare, 115 for the John Deere, 97 for the Claas. So the Claas was actually lower on a hectare basis, on an area combine basis. So on this one, when the John Deere lost to the Claas on fuel, they put a note in that says, even though it's more, it should be noted that the John Deere also had higher throughput and field capacity as per table 6. So it did. So they put they did it again, but they didn't mention this in the last one. They didn't mention that in the canola one, that the Claas actually put through more product. So why not get similar data? Like, why not? And I know it's tricky, but these are with headers $1 million machines. They're millions of dollars. These are marketing companies that need to sell these things to get recouped. They all have shareholders, so they have to do good data. You may as well do good data. I don't understand this. It's kind of irritating for the most part. So anyway, they talk about that. Here's what also they forget to mention when doing the fuel test for the wheat. When they started, the rotor speed was 1120 for the John Deere and 970 for the Claas, right? When they were doing the loss testing. Now, when they do the fuel testing, John Deere dropped its rotor to 960, Claas to 950. So John Deere dropped their rotor speed significantly. They're not even doing field conditions. They're just changing it. It's just disappointing. It's like, I'm green. I'm a John Deere kind of guy. I lean that way. But after this, it's just too bad to see. That's all. All right, John Deere also tested at the better part of the day. No surprise there, right? Now that we're kind of understanding how the tests are run, so it seems like they're picking the better part of the days as well. Now let's go over the residue management. even though we're just going to assume it's set up, you know, at this point, we may as well, right? We may as well. And maybe it's not, but I'm assuming now, because it seems like there's enough here to assume that it is. Anyway, not like it matters. Now they go over crop residue management. Here's a chart. Now it shows that the John Deere residue management is, now this time they've actually turned up the width because they want it to spread evenly across, right? So here it looks like John Deere's more even, where a lot of the straw on the Lexion basically, you know, falls right behind and then scatters out. All right, okay, then we talk about chop quality. So there's more short in the John Deere, more medium in the Claas, and more long in the Claas. There's some pictures of it too. There's some graphs and pictures, you can see them here. So let's go over the conclusions real quick. On the S780s, you could crank those things. You could crank them, and it would never reach the end on a 45-foot header. Never, ever, ever, ever. The crop cover is important, and I've heard a lot of agronomists talk about this, that getting that spread evenly over is an extremely important thing. You have your crop cover, you're holding your soil, it acts like a blanket, and it soaks up moisture and it keeps your moisture. So it is important to get the full spread. I did notice that and I can't speak for Claas, maybe it has the same problem, it doesn't spread all the way. On this test it does, but I know the S780s, they would never touch the ends, like rarely ever touch the ends. So look in any John Deere field, you can see it, and it is important, and that's why I'm bringing that up. And it's not bashing a brand, it's just telling, I'm John Deere, you know, or was, but that's just the reality of it, and it should be fixed to make a better combine. I don't like to bash combines because they're such a marvel of engineering. I could never do it. I could never do this stuff. It's such a complicated thing, especially with technology. I don't like to bash combines. I don't like to bash equipment. I do like to make fun of everything. I just think that makes life more interesting. So let's look at the conclusions real quick. So the results, they concluded that the Claas was only able to reach 90 tons at 1% loss, and the John Deere was able to do 115. So, you know, I don't know if I believe that, to be honest. You gotta keep in mind that there's a bunch of constraints here for everything. John Deere had a 28% higher capacity than that of the Claas. These are the claims. Cleaning shoe remained below 1% of the Claas and or below 0.5% on the John Deere. Fuel consumption, 2 and 2.1 respectively, so it's pretty close. When the fuel was respect to the time, John Deere was found to use 90% more fuel. John Deere had 20% and a 17% advantage when it came to grain throughput and work rate. And the residue management, the John Deere had a more distributed and smaller residue overall. So then John Deere takes these results and they put them up on their website. So they do compare total throughput, the X9 115 versus 90. They are saying the X9 has a big advantage. They do more tons per hour. Well, if the curves were actually built correctly, those numbers could change. Like, I'm not knocking the John Deere, I'm just saying that the data isn't as good as they like to think it is. Combine capacity, so they put bushels per hour because the combine is clearly going to be doing more because the Claas can't, you know, keep up. So they're saying it has more bushels per hour. Productivity, it does more acres per hour as well. It is running a 50-foot header versus a 45, you know. And that's because in canola it does the exact same, but in wheat, that's where they're naming this difference. So then they go into more acres per day, and then they talk machine depreciation. So savings per acre, they're saying that the Claas depreciates more than the John Deere does, and that's hard to kind of justify. Okay, and then they talk about operator costs because you can do more with a John Deere. It's gonna actually cost you less for an operator. even though the operating cost in canola is higher for a John Deere because the machine costs more. Harvesting at power limit, grain loss, they talk about that because they wanted this number, this high grain loss number at 6%, to show that this is where the data is for those really high ones. They want to show the difference at the worst. So when they're going the same, at the exact same speed, the Claas grain loss is way higher and the John Deere's stays low. So they're talking about that when you're ramming it way past what it's supposed to do. So throughput in canola, they're talking about the 3% loss. They're pretty equal, capacity equal, maximum throughput achieved. That's operator discretion. Fuel consumption, we've already talked about that. And then they make some assumptions. All amounts are in US, 8,000 acres of wheat, 102 bushels per acre for wheat yield, price of wheat, acres of canola, cost of diesel. Machine depreciation is based on $250 per engine hour reduction of value. So, and we don't know if that's entirely true. That's just, blanketed metric. A Jeep will hold its value better than a Ford Focus. So, not to say that one's a Jeep and one's a Focus. I'm just saying that there's a supply and demand thing. So, yeah. Anyway, the point of the whole thing is that PAMI and John Deere did a test on the John Deere X9 1100 versus the Claas 8800, and the consistency of this test throughout the whole thing, it's garbage. This test sucks, because all it leaves you with is more questions as like, well, why were you using different size headers? Well, one has to go faster than the other. Well, are you using tracks or tires? Why didn't you use the 8900 if you're using the 1100? How come you didn't pit the X9 1000 versus the 8800? Why isn't there Claas representatives out there? Because you know what would have happened if a Claas representative came out there? He would call the whole thing out because you would have seen right through it. And I don't know who reads the studies. Look how long it took me. I read it a while ago. I just haven't put up a video. But look at this. The problem is these machines are becoming $1 million. They're $1 million. So all these companies now have to try to shift people's mindsets on millions of dollars. Some people own 4, 5, 20, however many machines, and they want their machines because they have investments and they have investors and they want people to buy their stuff. When you do tests like this does a disservice to every combine out there. It's just because it's garbage. And now what you've done also, because I don't know why PAMI couldn't pick up on this stuff when they're trying to make this comeback, but they sloppily left all of this stuff as well. It's silly. So it seems like they were all, when John Deere pays for the tests, John Deere wins the test. You pick tests that you can win at, it seems. It shouldn't be that way, but the world we live in, the science we live in, they're all doing it. So this whole study should be redone, and redone properly and supervised. And there should be Claas representatives there and their best people to set their combines, and there should be John Deere representatives there and their best people to set their combines, and then PAMI could be the referee. That's it. Okay, so that's the whole video. That's the whole thing. Which one would I take? Well, they also didn't run the software to have their software versus Claas's software. So I'm positive that John Deere has gotten a Claas combine before and ran all these tests independently anyway themselves, or something. And I'm sure they've run the software against each other as well. So, maybe there should be a test on that too, bring in the software portion of it, because why not? Because who's running, you may as well use the tools at your disposal that sells your combine the best. So John Deere claims there's a 20% operating error in running the combine by yourself if you don't know what you're doing. But what that would do is if they run software versus software, that would take out human error. The fact that John Deere has a ton of experience on there makes it so they have a huge advantage over somebody that is familiar with Claas but doesn't run Claas or build the Claas like they do. So they've left in another error of the human error. It's going to be far greater on the Claas than it is going to be on the X9. So the test is junk. The whole point, the test sucks. It's garbage. The PAMI, I would question PAMI's tests moving forward. I'd be reading full documents and asking for as much information as possible, because they've done themselves a disservice doing that. And maybe they should also show how much John Deere paid them to do the tests. We should maybe see that money as well, because I believe that that also influences the results. Transparency wins, $1 million machines, marketing tactics. The truth is somewhere under there, but for now it's just more bullshit to add to an already world full of bullshit. And that's too bad. So, all right.